الله الرحمن الرحيم صلى الله عليك يا رسول الله وعلى أهل بيتك المظلومين صلى الله عليك يا مولاي وابن مولاي يا أبا عبد الله يا رحمة الله الواسعة ويا باب نجاة الأمة ما خاب من تمسك بكم أمنا من لجأ إليكم يا ليتنا كنا معكم فنفوز فوزا عظيما. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن سيدنا وعظيمنا وحبيب قلوبنا النبي المؤيد والرسول المسدد والمصطفى الأمجد والمحمود الأحمد حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد صلوات الله وسلامه عليه وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين سفن النجاة الأعلام من ركب سفينتهم نجا ومن تخلف عنها هلك وغرق. ثم أما بعد. Respected elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Only 2 nights left from the 10 days of mourning Sayyid al-Shuhada salawatullah wa salamuhu alayh, and I think it won't be justifiable on my end if I don't emphasize on the last of these 2 nights the importance of holding such gatherings and such mourning sessions for our Imams salawatullah wa salamu alayh. Over the course of 1400 years ago, as you are all aware, that we've been commemorating this. And sometimes people think, what is the use? What are we getting out of this? Why do we constantly repeat the same thing over and over and over and over again? But when you realize and you dig deep inside the merits and the reasons and even the characteristics of these majalis, you would come up with only one conclusion, and that conclusion is that these majalis are a true representation of your identity. It makes your identity. It actually forms your identity. It makes you who you are and what you are and how you think and how you believe and how you act and how you do things and how you relate to things. Without these majalis, we do not have an identity that we can claim to be the followers of Muhammad wa al Muhammad salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhi wa alayhim ajma'in. You know, I was just talking to one of our community members, one of our respected community members, about the characteristics of the Imams, the character of Imam Ali and those from his progeny, like his own children, salawatullah wa salamu alayh. And it's so fascinating when you look at their character. You would find that in every aspect of their life, they are perfect. Because they are perfect. For example, there is a concept in a game which is not familiar to your part of the world, but it's very, very familiar, for example, in the West and in the Indian subcontinent in particular. It's called cricket. Do you know that game, cricket? Probably some people watch it. There is a concept in that particular game to describe a perfect player. They call him an all-rounder. Right? Am I right or wrong? I'm good at my sport, right? Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. They call him an all-rounder. What is an all-rounder? You know what is an all-rounder? If he bats, he's perfect. If he bowls, he's perfect. If he fields, he's perfect. So he's an all-rounder. He's good at every position he holds. And if you looked at the character of Imam Ali salawatullahi wa salamu alayh, you would find him his best and perfect at every position he is in. Salawatullah wa salamu alayh. Same with Imam Hussein salawatullah wa wa salam alayhi. Same with his progeny, those prominent members of his progeny, salawatullahi wa salam alayhi, such as, for example, his brother Al-Abbas or his son Ali al-Akbar. You know, Ali al-Akbar, in terms of status, they call him Tali al-A'imma. Allahu Akbar. You know what that means? Tali al-A'imma. Yani even the Sufara al-Arba'a, the 4 ambassadors of Imam al-Mahdi, cannot reach the position of Ali al-Akbar. Because he's right after the Imams. Salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhim ajma'in. As we will come to know inshallah in his maqtal, what status Ali al-Akbar. Another person who's an all-rounder. Because when Imam Hussein was coming in a place called Zubala or Zurud or Qadisiyya, and one of these 3 places, he takes a nap on the back of his horse, Imam Hussein salawatullah wa salam alayh. And then he wakes up, yastarja wa yuhawqil. He's saying, La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Ali al-Akbar looks at his father and says, Mimma istirja'uka ya abata. Why are you saying, Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un? He said, I saw in my dream a call from somewhere saying, Inna al-qawma yasirun wal manaya tasiru ma'ahum. Allahu Akbar. These people are, walking or going in a particular way, and death is following them. Death is for now. This is the answer that our children need to learn. This is the answer that our community needs to affiliate with and feel the vigor inside their body when they talk about the saga of Karbala, Malhamatu Karbala. He says, in Arabic, when the Hamza comes before a su'al, it doesn't mean before a question, it doesn't mean you're not sure. You are sure. Okay? أَوَلَمْ تُؤْمِنْ? Allah says to Ibrahim, قَالَ بَلَا أَنَا مُؤْمِنْ. يعني Allah is saying, أَنْتَ مُؤْمِنْ يا Ibrahim. أَوَلَمْ تُؤْمِنْ meaning to negate faith for Ibrahim. Aren't you a believer? No. It doesn't come in that term. It doesn't, come in that siyaq. So he says to his father, أَوَلَسْنَا عَلَى الْحَقِّ. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. أَوَلَسْنَا عَلَى الْحَقِّ. Are we not on the truth? Of course we are on the truth. That's what Ali al-Akbar is trying to. Don't ever waver when it comes to your faith. Don't buckle. No matter what people say about you, no matter what, your faith is based on nothing other than the Quran and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Do you know that? Al-Bakkai al-Hussein, for example. Did we invent that? Did we really invent crying on Hussein salawatullahi wa salam alayhi? La wallah. If there is anyone on the face of this earth who can claim to be a follower of the sunnah of the Prophet, I would say it without an iota of a doubt that I am a follower of the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the sunnah of the Prophet is the delight of my eyes, the delight of my existence. Salama tadkhul ala nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Salama goes to the Prophet and Al-Hussein is with him. And he's holding him and crying. She says, why are you crying? He said, oh Salama, my nation will kill that child of mine. So who invented the sunnah of crying on Hussein salawatullahi wa salam? And have you ever heard about someone being cried upon before his death? Ajib, normally you cry after someone's death, not before someone's death. So what is the significance of the Prophet crying before someone's death, such as in the example of Imam Hussein? It's to highlight to the ummah that this is my practice and this is what I would have done if I outlived Hussein. Salawatullahi wa salam alayhi. That I would have carried out a majlis on behalf of my son. Is Yaqub any far further away from the Prophet? Are they not from the same tree of prophets? Right? Yaqub is allowed to cry for his son, yet knowing that his son is not even dead. Right or wrong? No, he's a prophet. It revealed to him that Allah revealed to Yaqub, don't worry, Yusuf, your Qurrat Ain is coming back to you. He knows he's coming back, but he's absent from him. He's not in his presence. He cries on him until his eyes turn white. Cataract. You know what cataract? We didn't know what cataract before. But in the case of Yaqub, it was cataract. Right? He couldn't see anymore. His vision became blurred. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described him in the Quran. فَبْيَضَّتْ عَيْنَاهُ مِنَ الْحُزْنِ فَهُوَ كَظِيمٌ. Allahu Akbar. So these are the caliber of people that we admire, we follow, we want to pursue, right? And tonight and tomorrow night is the basis of my lecture. The morning sessions, I say, and gatherings of Imam Hussein salawatullah wa salamu alayh represent number one what? Number one. And I say this to the world. Our gatherings and processions for Imam Hussein are nothing more than a peaceful expression of our identity. We're not here to fight with anyone, cause problem to anyone. In fact, we are obligated that when we carry our gatherings, when we carry our morning session, we should be at our best behavior, because that gathering is a representation of your identity and your faith. So you want to present your identity and your faith to others in the best amicable way. Just like Imam al-Sadiq salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi said in one of his advice to his followers, he said, learn our affairs, teach it to others, because when people see you and they see your character and they become absorbed in your character, they will point to you with their fingers and say, هذا جعفري فيسرني ذلك. Allahu Akbar. Imam al-Sadiq says, when people point at you and say, you are the follower of Ja'far, this brings joy to me. Right? And these expressions of this gathering where we express our mourning to the death and martyrdom of Imam Hussein salawatullahi wa salamu alayh is an indication that we are here to follow the creme de la creme of their teaching. We are here to be a representation of their movement and values and principles, so people can learn and be drawn towards Muhammad wa al Muhammad salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhim ajma'in. Why do I emphasize on this point in particular? Because sociologists, ulama al-nafs, ulama al-ijtima', sociologists, they say what? One of the most difficult things in society and in the world we live in is the expression of one's identity. Right? Imagine you live in an environment other than yours, and you are trying to hold fast to your identity. Imagine the kind of challenges you will face. Right? Imagine going to the West, for example, and putting the hijab on. And see the treatment you will get. And see how they will behave against you. And see what they will tell you. Imagine telling your boss on a Friday, I want to go and pray Friday. And see the look on your boss's face. Right? Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. We live in an Islamic environment. Our mosques are wide open. No one would tell you anything. In fact, you can persecute someone who makes fun of your hijab, and we still don't follow the hijab. Ajib. Right? And we don't observe Friday prayer sometimes, right? Of course, whatever the case is, maybe based on your taqleed. I'm not trying to charge at anyone in any one shape or form. Astaghfirullah, not my point. I'm just making a comparison, an example, right? Try to fast in a community where people look at you and say, are you serious? You're fasting from dawn to sunset and you're not allowed to have a sip of water? This is the next statement that follows. You know what the next statement that comes? Are you mad? Subhanallah. Imagine having to hear these 30 days every year in your life. You know, from friends or colleagues or university lecturers or, you know, teachers at school and what have you, and so on and so forth. I want to take off a day for Eid. Oh, we don't have a day for Eid. We have Christmas, bro. Okay, Christmas is for you and I respect this. But my Christmas is not during your Christmas. Right? Well, go get your dad. I'm not convinced that you you need that day as a break. But my dad is telling me, you think I'm coming to you by myself? It's my dad, my parents are the ones who's asking me to ask you. Anyway, so it's a representation of one's identity. One of the causes of major conflicts in the world today over the course of history is the very question of self-identity. Wars are being fought on the basis of what? Of identity. And the safeguarding of one's identity in the world. When Islam came into being, how did it express itself initially? Tell me. Did Islam come with any concept of fighting? When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to the Prophet that every time the Prophet appeals to Allah with the dua, they're killing my companions, they're putting rocks on Bilal, they're assassinating the family of Ammar. Assassination, they killed them in front of their own son. You know, Sumayya and Yasir were killed in front of their own son Ammar. So much so that Ammar had to say a few unpleasant words about his own prophet. Right or wrong? Yet the Prophet came in order to maintain his identity, to maintain his belief and identity. What did he say to Yasir, to Ammar? He said, وَإِنْ عَادُوا فَعُدْ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْكَ يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ وَعَلَى أَهْلِ بَيْتِكَ الطَّيِّبِينَ. You protected your friends and colleagues, even at the cost of them saying some unpleasant words about you, in order to protect their faith. Right? Right? And Allah is appealing, Ya Allah, permission. No permission is given. 13 years, no permission is given until they initiated the attack. Right? Then Allah says what? أُذِنَ لِلَّذِينَ ظُلِمُوا أَن يُقَاتِلُوا وَإِنَّ اللَّهَ عَلَى نَصْرِهِمْ لَقَدِيرٌ. Only then Allah gave permission after 13 years. But what were the expression that identified me as a Muslim? The rituals, right? Hajj, Salah, Zakat, Siyam. This what made me stand out in the community, right? And these are peaceful expression or threatening expression? Peaceful expression. I'm not hurting anyone. Habibi, you don't want to fast, but I'm fasting. I'm not obliging you to fast, right? I'm going and performing an act of charity. I'm not telling you to provide an act of charity to anyone. So all this is to preserve the Islamic identity. And it was expressed in the most peaceful manner, right? In any shape or form, it was expressed in a manner that actually sometimes appeals to people. You know, with these demonstrations started in the West against what's happening in Gaza, and Muslims were praying in the streets. Of course, by the way, don't ever think in your wildest imagination that when the Muslims prayed in a public place, they prayed without prior having an approval from the authorities first. That is common. Whenever we go out in a rally, we seek permission from the authorities, and in fact the authorities come and they actually protect the protesters. Even at the time of prayer, we tell the authorities we are praying at that particular time. So there's no issues of someone coming and saying the Muslim community have broken a law, right? So what happened in these rallies? You find non-Muslims, because Salah is something visible. It's something unique. It's different. You would find people coming, joining the prayer without knowing what the prayer is all about. They're just impressed by this movement. You see people, women, white with blonde hair, without hijab, standing by other sisters and praying, following the movements up and down. And then after the movement, after the salah, I was told by so many sisters that some of these white, ladies would come after salah and they say, we just felt at peace. What is this prayer that you do? And we didn't even understand anything, but it was peaceful. It was peace. This is your identity. Be proud of it. Today I wish I could show you this video. Wallah, I wish I could. A young lady, a young mom from the state of Bahrain. She said, I was told to put the hijab on. I said, over my dead body. Me cover my hair? It's a sign of my beauty. I used to come out in Bahrain's mall and people look at me and says, wow, look at her hair. Now you want me to cover it? I'm not covering my hair, bro. You know, over the course of time, she fell pregnant as a young mom. She had certain complications in her pregnancy. She said, you know what? I better go for ziyarah. Subhanallah. She went for ziyarah. The battle started inside her. The battle started inside that young woman, saying, you know, what am I doing with my life? Is it truly, when I go out and people remark at my hair and my beauty, is it really satisfactory to me? I am actually living a dream. I'm living in an imaginative world. It means nothing to me, their comment anymore, whether I'm beautiful or not, because I am now violating Allah's law. I'm breaking that relationship between me and my God, and I don't want this to happen. And she began the process of reform and coming back. And she said it was a struggle. But now she says, I will never give up on my hijab and my identity and my affiliation with my imams. So much so that once she was desperate due to the complications of her pregnancy, she wanted so much to visit the imam. She called one of the caravans. You know, هدول شو يسموهم القافلة الحملات أحسنت رحم الله والد. One of the hamlat, and they told, please, one seat, only one seat. They told her, we don't have a place for you. قفلت الحملات كلها. It's gone. There's no place. She said, I was so depressed. I sat with myself, crying myself to sleep, until out of the blue, I get a text message. The same person who said, you don't have a place, he said, we found you one seat. You better come, because it will fill up. He said, consider it done. And I went. And she says, look, you remember when I told you a few nights about Ashabul Kahf, that you have to take the first step and Allah will advance you. Allah will provide the means for you. إِنَّهُمْ فِتْيَةٌ آمَنُوا بِرَبِّهِمْ وَزِدْنَاهُمْ هُدًى. They are a group of youth who took the first step, and Allah then says what? And we advanced them in guidance. She said, Allah provided for me in that hamla the most religious, the most immaculate, the most well-behaved woman that I have traveled with in my life. Look how Allah uses His own wisdom and ways to provide guidance to others. Just fix your intention. Right? Put your intention in the right place and Allah will come to your rescue. Do you think you approach Allah and Allah will run away from you? It's a promise that Allah made on Himself. You come to me, I will approach you and reciprocate a tenfold. A tenfold. But find God first. Find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Give Allah priority in your life. Don't worry about what people, the hair you are worried about soon will be extensions. Right? Right? We know these things. We had to learn them. Huh? All this fake beauty that you are worried about, whether men or women, right? Whether men or women, a day will come where you will surrender it all. Your whole body will decompose. None of that beauty will remain. Right? Because the beauty of a human being does not lie only in his physical features. The beauty of a human being lies primarily in his character, in his akhlaq, in his attitude, in the way he talks to people, in the way he accommodates people, in the way he gives of himself to people, in the way he sacrifices of himself to make others happy. You know, to make others happy. Even in any relationship, especially in the marital relationship. What is love? What is love, do you think? Love, do you think, is Titanic? That's fake. Time zone? Fake. Love is when the husband tries his level best, even if it means he has to work tirelessly with sleepless night just to provide for his family so he could see that smile on their faces. That's love. Love is when the husband goes out of his way to give his wife what he could not give himself or what his parents couldn't give him in order to see her happy and smiling at home. That is love, and vice versa. When we sacrifice for one another. Love is sacrifice, right? If you really love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you would sacrifice of yourself in order to ensure a better and a more lasting existence of yourself in the hereafter. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Right from day 1 to day 40, and sometimes all the way to Safar, right? We hold these majalis, and sometimes we go beyond Safar, until the Rabi' al-Awwal, right? Everything seems to change in our existence. Our behavior changes. Even the way we eat changes. Even the type of food changes. We become more modest, right or wrong. We don't feel like eating in Muharram because we feel the agony and the hurt, of what happened to Ahlul Bayt salawatullah wasalam. Even the way you look changes. All of a sudden, you are draped in black. All of a sudden, you keep a bead. Right? Or most of you keep a bead, alhamdulillah. Don't judge me, and I don't have enough hair. I try to gather them all here so that I can keep a bead, alhamdulillah. So we try our best to change that. What do you think inspires you to do that? What? It's those majalis. It's the identity issue. The identity. Now all of a sudden you feel you are affiliated with a community, with a group. That gathering brings out that identity. You march in such a way towards the Husayniyah or the mosque in groups and as individuals, and you see, oh my God, what has happened to Turmiziyah all of a sudden? Used to take you 6 minutes from Sha'ab to Turmiziyah. Now it's taking you 45 minutes to get to a majlis. Ajib, what is going on? There is a march of identity. Allahu Akbar. That's the beauty of Muharram and the beauty of belonging to the school of Ahlul Bayt salawatullahi wa salamu alayhim ajma'in. You feel you are secured. Your identity is intact. No one can take it away from you. Basically, what we are trying to say to everyone and to ourselves as followers of Ahlul Bayt, that we cry for them, we mourn for them, and thus we declare before the whole world that we seek Hussein. We walk on the path of Hussein. We love Hussein, and we are in fact reviving ourselves through Hussein. We're not reviving Hussein. We are reviving ourselves through Hussein salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. No wonder why Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, when he speaks about Hussein, what does he say? He says, إِنَّ لِلْحُسَيْنِ حَرَارَةً فِي قُلُوبِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ لَا تَبْرَدُ أَبَدًا. Indeed, there is this kind of heat in the heart of the believers for Hussein that never subsides. Never subsides. One day I was sitting with a marja and I said to him, Maulana, I give lectures in English. What should I do when I give these lectures? What is your advice? He looked towards the ground for about a minute, a whole minute of silence. Then he raised his head up and he said, when you represent Hussein with the truth. Because just the name Hussein itself is enough to make you cry. Just the name Hussein. Salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. What happened to him? How he fought. How he gave everything. خُذْ حَتَّى تَرْضَى أَرَضِيت خُذْ حَتَّى تَرْضَى. Right? This is, wallah, he says, أَلَا إِنَّ الدَّعِيَ إِنَّ الدَّعِيَ قَدْ رَكَزَ بَيْنَ اثْنَتَيْنِ بين السلة والذل وهيهات من الذل. He said this, so and so has given me an option between two very difficult choices. One is to take arm, and one is to submit to humiliation. And by God, I will never surrender myself to humiliation. Silla means the sword, means fighting. And I will not allow myself to be humiliated. This is the kind of sessions that we derive. This is the kind of lessons we derive when we gather. And you know what? Sometimes you may not feel it, but wallah, let someone come and take these sessions from you. You would die. You would be like a fish out of water. Imagine, God forbid, if this session stopped one day, what will happen to you and me? You can't live. You can't survive. You would say, I cannot mourn Hussein salawatullah for 10 days. I can't do it. Even you remember the days of a pandemic, right? What did we do? We were fixated to to our screens. We want just a lecture from anywhere in the world that reminds us about our Imam salawatullah wa salamu alayh. If we couldn't come physically to the majlis. Why? Because we get inspired. We maintain our identity through Hussein salawatullah wa salamu alayh. ورحم الله الشاعر حين قال, or those raduds when they say, احنا غير حسين ما عدنا وسيلة. احنا غير حسين ما عدنا وسيلة. He is our intermediary to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who fixated the identity of Islam in the world due to his struggle. Salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhi. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. I have to go to the majlis. I hardly have anything. Ali al-Akbar is not your average boy or young man, right? He was, as I said, next in line with the Imams, next in line. Tali al-A'imma, in the ziyarah we say, right? To Ali al-Akbar. And it has been narrated in the ziyarah of none other than our master, Sahib al-Asr wa-Zaman, Ajjalallah ta'ala farajahu sharif, when he says about the way he visits Ali al-Akbar. He says to him what? Assalamu alayka ya awwala qatilin min nasli khayri salil min sulalati Ibrahim al-Khalil. Look at that ziyarah to Ali al-Akbar, because you know Ali al-Akbar was the first one to come out from Bani Hashim. Bani Hashim. Ja'far al-Tustari, the alim, he says when Ali al-Akbar came out to fight, Imam Hussein nearly breathed his life 3 times. 3 times. He nearly lost his life. Salawatullah wa salamu alayhi. Because of how much he was attached to his son. Salawatullah wa salamu. And what his son represented in terms of the wealth and the faith and the knowledge that Ali al-Akbar possessed. Salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhi. If Ibrahim was ordered to slaughter his son and he complied, yes, but he never did it. But Imam Hussein never hesitated, right? One never did it and one never what? Hesitated. That's the difference. وَفَدَيْنَاهُ بِذِبْحٍ عَظِيمٍ. It's Hussein and his family, salawatullah wa salamu alayhi. They were the real sacrifice. They were the great sacrifice for the sake of Islam, right? They were the ones who died and the blood was drenched the entire land of Karbala, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhim ajma'in. The young Abdullah al-Radi' gets slaughtered. What does Imam Hussein say? He takes the blood, throws it in the heaven, and he says, خُذْ حَتَّى تَرْضَى. أَيُرْضِيكَ هَذَا? Then take as much as you want, right? Al-Akbar gets cut into pieces. Pieces. Salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. And the Imam, and while he was thirsty, with his tongue as dry as a wood, piece of wood, and the Imam salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, what does he say? Allahumma taqabbal minna hadha al-qurban. Oh Allah, accept from us this sacrifice. Just like when Sayyidah Zainab salamullah alayha, after the aftermath of Karbala, she goes into the field, she stumbles among all those, bodies that are decapitated and cut into pieces until she stumbles over the body of her own brother, salawatullah wa salamu alayhi. What does she do? She collapses? No. Hiya al-Jabal al-Samit. Salawatullahi wa salamu. She takes her hand, puts them under the body of her brother Imam Hussein, and she talks to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. She turns towards heaven and she says, Taqabbal minna hadha al-qurban. Oh Allah, accept from us this sacrifice. Allahu Akbar. Because when it is for Allah, nothing is big. Nothing is, has a price, because everything can be given to Allah. Ali al-Akbar was the most in resemblance to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, whether it is in character or whether it is in looks. And when the people of Medina would be reminded of the Prophet, they would take a look at Ali al-Akbar because of how much he reminded them of Rasulullah. As I said, Sheikh Ja'far al-Tustari says, when Imam Hussein came to give permission to his son Ali al-Akbar, he nearly had his death death in front of him in 3 different ways. The first time when Ali al-Akbar approached his father Imam Hussein in order to give him permission to go and fight, the women folk of the Imam's camp came out. They began to look at Ali al-Akbar, ammatuhu wa akhawatuh. They hung themselves and they clicked themselves to his halls. At that time, when the Imam saw the woman in that condition, his soul nearly came out of his body, and he cried out towards him, دعنه فإنه مقتول في سبيل الله. Then the Imam took him by his horns. He then draped his eyes and began to cry. And then he held his son close to him and began to say the following words: ولدي علي إلي أودعك وتودعني، أشمك وتشمني، فتعانقا حتى غشي عليهما. And then when Imam Hussein woke up from his subconsciousness, he took his hand towards heaven and he began to read, اللهم اشهد على هؤلاء القوم فقد برز إليهم غلام أشبه الناس خلقا وخلقا ومنطقا برسولك محمد، وكنا إذا اشتقنا إلى نبيك نظرنا إلى هذا الغلام اللهم امنعهم بركات الأرض وفرقهم تفريقا ومزقهم تمزيقا واجعلهم طرائق قددا ولا ترضي الولاة عنهم أبدا فإنهم دعونا لينصرونا ثم عدوا علينا يقاتلوننا. While Imam Hussein is bidding his son farewell, Ali al-Akbar realized that this is now the permission to go and fight. So he attacked the enemy lines like a roaring lion. He turned the right of the army on the left and the left on the right. They couldn't know what to do with him, so much so that someone said, has Ali ibn Abi Talib returned to earth from his death? Then he began to recite Salamullah alayh, Ana Ali ibn al-Husayn ibn Ali, Nahnu wa baytillah awla bin nabi. والله لا يحكم فينا ابن الدعي أطعنكم بالرمح حتى ينثني أضربكم بالسيف حتى يلتوي ضرب غلام هاشمي علوي. He continued to fight until he was drenched with his blood. He came back to his father Imam Hussein with so many wounds on his body and the blood coming out of his armor, saying to his father, Al-Atash قد أخذ مني مبلغا هل من شربة إلى الماء. Imam Hussein consoled him and asked him to go back. He said, oh father, ثقل الحديد قد أجهدني فهل من شربة ماء في سبيل أتقوى بها على الأعداء. ضمه الحسين إلى صدره وبكى. Imam Hussein drew him closer to his chest and began to cry and said to him, يعز على محمد وعليه وعلى أبيك أن تدعوهم فلا يجيبوك وتستغيث بهم فلا يغيثوك. At that time, Imam Hussein pushed over his ring to Ali al-Akbar and said to him, maybe this will help you if you bite on it. Then he returned back into the battlefield and began to fight the enemy lines despite all his wounds, saying to them, الحرب قد بانت لها حقائق وظهرت من بعدها مصادق والله رب العرش لا نفارق جمعكم أو تغمد البوارق. يا مؤمنون عظم الله لكم الأجر. Someone appeared to Ali al-Akbar by the name of Murra ibn Munqidh al-Tamimi. He struck Ali al-Akbar with a lance. Another person came and hit Ali al-Akbar on his head. The blood came out and the blood started pouring on the eyes of the horse. The horse, instead of coming back with Ali al-Akbar to the camp of Imam Hussein, it took him into the enemy lines. Ajarakumullah. They began to cut him into pieces. Iraban iraba. Rahimallah man nada wa aliyah. وأكبره وشهيدا. Then he called out to his father Imam Hussein, أبتاه عليك مني السلام هذا جدي رسول الله قد سقاني بكأسه الأوفى شربة لا أظمأ بعدها أبدا وهو يقول لك العجل العجل فإن لك كأسا مذخورا. ساعد الله قلب الحسين سلام الله عليه. تقول سكينة says, when my father heard the cries of Ali al-Akbar, look what happened. He began to take one step and he would fall down, salawatullah wa salam. He couldn't stay up. He would walk and fall. He would walk and fall. He would walk and fall. And then the voices of the women raised in crying. Imam Hussein settled them down. He said, إِنَّ الْبُكَاءَ أَمَامَكُمْ. You shall cry ahead when everyone is perished, including myself. Then he ran towards the place where his son was being chopped into pieces and cut into pieces. He stood on top of his body. He found him cut by the swords into different parts. إربا إربا جلس عنده أخذ رأسه وضمه في حجره. He sat next to him. He placed his head in his lap and he began to take away the blood and wipe the blood away and the dust away from his face. Allahu Akbar. This is the third time Imam Hussein nearly lost his life. The narrator said that when Imam Hussein went down to Ali al-Akbar and he placed him on his chest, he began to say the following words: Bunay qatal Allah qawman qataluk ma ajra'ahum ala ar-Rahman wa ala intihaki hurmati ar-Rasul. Then he began to cry, saying, Waladi Ali ala dunya ba'daka al-afa. أما أنت يا بني فقد استرحت من هم الدنيا وغمها وبقي أبوك لهمها وكربها. Salamullah ala Ali al-Akbar. Look what happened. He couldn't carry him because he was cut into pieces. So he called the youth of Bani Hashim. Imam Hussein, with all his might, he couldn't carry Ali al-Akbar. Do you know why? It's not because he was heavy for him. Because every time Imam Hussein would carry Ali al-Akbar from one side, his other side would crumble because he was cut into pieces. So he called the youth of Bani Hashim. He brought a particular mat. Allahu Akbar. He began to collect the pieces of Ali al-Akbar into the mat in order that they would carry him, and they wrapped him in that mat and they brought him back to the camp. Can you imagine the state of his aunt Zainab? And on the riwayah that says his mother Layla was there what shape she was in to see her son in that way. What shape was your Imam in salawatullah wa salamuhu alayh. Rahim Allah man nada wa aliya wa shahida wa akbara. Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا آل محمد أي منقلب ينقلبون ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. 5 times from the bottom of your heart. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء. أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء. أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء. أمن. Last one with the loudest of your voices. أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء. بحق محمد وآل محمد, by the right of Muhammad and the progeny of Muhammad, and by the right of Surah Al-Mubarakah Al-Fatihah مع الصلوات.